Hello and welcome to day 46 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tomlin's Nyback, and thanks for hanging in there. We're just moving right along. We're going to get right into it with our introductions. If you've been here any length of time and followed along, you know we are informed when we talk about a lot of the work that a man named Dr. Claude Anderson is doing around the country. He speaks in circuits and things like that to crowds, written a few phenomenal books about racism and black life in America, along with white entitlement and privilege. And he has powernomics.com. I encourage you to visit there. Also look at, go to Heritage Institute. You'll find his influence there as well if he's not the director. Look behind me, you see the hashtag #US2, hashtag USTOO. There's more conversations around black life. My recent visit to that site and area, there's a lot of issues dealing with black women, but everybody's included, everybody's welcome. Also look up the site Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, and I don't know what the suffix is on that, but look them up. That's more areas and conversations you can find about black life, black conversations here in America. As far as Dr. Claude Anderson, I want to introduce you. I want you to get these books. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Black History, White Wealth, Search for Economic Power and Justice. And finally, Powernomics, his national plan to empower Black America. And all three books are phenomenal, exciting, nothing but good things to say about all of that. The information piled up in there to really get you thinking. Black Americans need to think critically about what's going on in their lives, their position, who they are. On that note, I saw a blurb today. The NFL's, I don't know what you call it, reopening Colin Kaepernick's case. Another NFL players mentioned in there. Colin Kaepernick was made essentially more famous. He was already a great quarterback with the San Francisco 49ers, went to, I believe he's been to Super Bowls or whatever, but I know a lot about football. Great quarterback with the 49ers. The league pressured him and kind of drove him out because he would kneel down during the National Anthem. At the time, I had no inkling how far down the rabbit hole American racism went. But he was a good man, a forward thinker, and he said, no, I'm not standing up for that. Now that I understand America, its politics, its history better, as I filled in some gaps and looked at black exclusion and white privilege and entitlement in America, I understand better Colin's message as well as Dr. Anderson's as well. So shout out to him. Google him, see what the latest update. Now, what I want, though, is, one thing, well, there's a couple things I want you to leave 365 days of racial change, towards racial change with, and that is, one, get tangible assets, get things you can hold in your hand that really mean something, not plaques, awards, apologies. We really don't need any of that. Civil rights, we did all that. Thankful for all those people who gave their lives, blood, and marched. It was a good stepping stone, but it was good just to reveal some stuff and get some of the fluff and irrelevancies out of the way. Those are things white America will give us 24/7. We'll march and they can write laws and stuff. We need land. We need access to wealth. We need the same privileges. We need unfettered economic discourse in America. Give us that. Stop oppressing our businesses, making us pay more, making blacks or quarantining black businesses. We got so much overseas and so much to China and all this stuff. We're forced to go to Walmarts and these big outlet stores that are nothing but Chinese consignment. So, that give us some tangible things that we can build on so that we can pass wealth to our generations and generations. You realize, I'm just learning, in America, we've created a class of people. Well, the class of people is growing, of those individuals whose inherited wealth grows. And, it's more than being born into an affluent house. It's their fortunes have grown to the point where their money truly is the central working apparatus in their lives. They could just lay there and never have to work because their capital is that large. You understand? And it's Dr. Anderson talks about a black overclass, and he's talking about the stratifications of wealth and prosperity in the nations, and we can go all over race and stuff like that. But economically, there's an overclass of an overclass of the elite class, financial class. It's amazing. So I want blacks to pay attention. So that's the one thing I want blacks to come away with. Another thing I'd like blacks to come away with in this year is critique, understand, have some dialogue. Does slave mentality pass on from generation to generation? Is it something that's inherited, that we live out, pass down to our children's children? Does white privilege, dominance, entitlement pass on? The mindset. I believe it does, but I try not to give you answers here, but want you to think critically about that. And second, back to the economics and the overclass of the overclass, elite class, master class, and all that. There's a way to move financially in the United States, and if blacks come together as a united economic bloc, then we could start drawing better attention to ourselves, where our superstars and those black athletes, game show hosts, entertainers, actors, those very few who use their position to influence and be a voice. They won't have to be alone in their fight. One of them, it would probably take communities upon communities just to really give voice to some black issue that one person can communicate to the world. But if us as a community, I don't know how much support Colin got, and that's kind of the way. A visionary is going to move out, and it's time to move. Come with me or not is the idea. He didn't get a whole lot of. I don't see him taking a whole lot of counsel. He's alpha. It's got to be pretty much an alpha to be a quarterback of a top-notch NFL team. So he didn't ask a whole lot of support and whatnot. He knelt down. It was time to kneel down, And so we need the black community to do that. Let's get to it. Today is we're looking at Dr. Anderson's book, A Black History Reader, and you look in your notes and things. Pretty explicit, and we talk about that. I also talk about how white Americans need to be paying attention to this. I'm totally supportive. I'm supportive of everyone, but my burden here is to get blacks to have a seat at the table of wealth and prosperity. But I think whites are not paying attention because I work alongside every class and color in America. I'm down the bottom, blue collar, baby. So I'm not. I sweat and work and hard alongside whites, Hispanics, all that. But it's a black message. But whites are not. I don't think whites are paying attention because they have so much privilege. They think, but they can fall. They don't think they can fall through these cracks because when it comes to wealth and prosperity, I think any type of elite white class, anybody in America realize the landscape is green. And once we can get past that, once we understand that and get there, we can really overcome a whole lot of issues. So today we're in Black History Reader, Dr. Anderson's book, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. And we're looking at a new term, maybe, for some of us. It was for me. When I read it, it makes sense when we get into it. It's question 58, page 173. I encourage you to get the book. And the question is, what are sundown towns? Let me read. The first sentence gives a pretty specific definition. A sundown town was an organized jurisdiction that enacted public policies and practices that kept blacks from being in their all-white towns after certain hours. There was a curfew. If you're black, get out of there because you're going to face abuse, grave, deadly danger if we find you in these city limits after hours. Now, don't think of this as something you find down in Florida or the deep south in Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and whatnot. This is all over the country. Most of them, for a time, were located in the Midwest, which makes sense because blacks, they were not permitted to participate in the land ownership and the gold rush and the wealth and resources out west. That's why our black and white westerns, you don't see any black folks. You might see one black person per season of them producing those shows, and that's because blacks weren't allowed out west anyway. If they went out west, they were alone and much more vulnerable, so they had to stick around. Also, there were little communities that would grow up around these sundown towns, because it was okay for the blacks to come in, do the work and the menial labor and stuff like that, but then kick them out. But you pay the blacks enough for their daily bread. Maybe at the end of the week they have some disposable income to get alcohol or whatever they're into, right? The juke joints and stuff like that. And they go to church on Sunday, back to work all week, slaving and all that. So they're spending all their energy there in the white folks' town and all that stuff, and coming back home exhausted and have nothing left for their kids. So their neighborhoods are depressed, not kept, and stuff like that. We can talk about the dysfunction that comes from that kind of system here in America. So you didn't want to be, if you were black, you didn't want to be in those towns. Very, very dangerous for a black individual to be there. This is back in the time and the days. We got Jim Crow, moving on and stuff like that. These kind of racial elements and whatnot. And it was very common to see billboards promoting the Ku Klux Klan, explicitly telling blacks to get out after a certain time, and things like that. The Sundown Town. Um, one kind of case study that Dr. Anderson goes into is he talks about Alba, Texas. And he mentions the proliferation of sundown towns. I'm sure they had their season. In America, places go through their seasons, so you had the seasons of sundown towns. But as time moved on, and people, you see, racism is not a necessary thing. It's a derived education and attitude, right? So in reality, it's not like every white person wants to practice and exercise racism, exclusivity, domination, entitlement over all people. As like, because it's another thing to worry about in the world. See, people are people. They want to love who they want to love, have some peace, some space, love their children, raise their children, and all that. But to engaging in racism and stuff, that's somebody else's agenda, and it's just another thing on the plate. Because even white people still pay taxes, are worried about voting, war, economics, and things like that. So sundown towns had their space, but I can imagine, and it happens mostly, I guess, with the younger folks, if they're not too indoctrinated and educated into a racist, supremacist point of view, that it just fades off, just goes somewhere. And in the shrinkage, as the season of sundown towns diminish, they kind of do exist. Like there's white neighborhoods. Well, there's white neighborhoods in America. Blacks can't be there at all unless they're specifically working or like have business. You don't just walk through portions of Beverly Hills and some, you can't. There's gated communities and things like that. But in the shrinkage of that racist bubble, the demonstration of that, these towns, the last vestiges of these sundown towns were more located in the South, as you might imagine. Texas stood out to Dr. Anderson as far as some of these towns. And so he mentions a few here: Cumbie, Grand Saline, Vidor, and Alba. And he says, as we entered the 21st century, Texas was still had the reputation of being the worst in America. And I'll share a quick experience. I used to drive trucks, and I met this racist attitude when I was leaving Texas. I was in Texark, Kansas. So it's like the right shoulder of Texas as you're kind of leaving out of there. Oh, excuse me. And so I'm leaving out of there, and I had a load of paint, and paint at certain qualities is considered a hazardous material just because of its quality. It's not so much. It's of course a fire hazard and things like that, but the law is that if you're hauling so much of it, you have to classify it as a hazardous material. And that's important because I'm coming through, and I've got these. You got to have these hazmat placards on all four sides of your vehicle, front, back, both sides. and I came correct, and I had my hazmat endorsement and all these things. And so this weighmaster, I'm coming through, just getting my truck weighed, leaving the state. He really jumped up on my truck, and he's all uppity and in my face, and he tells me to pull over. He's very rude, very short with me, and he tells his buddy in the tower, that he's going to get me. Those were his words. I got. He didn't say black or any racist thing like that. I was naive. I didn't perceive it at that moment. But he says he's going to get me, as though like, he sees the placards and stuff. So he's trying to find me out of order. So I was like, no problem. I had all the paperwork, endorsements, necessary licenses, all that, and I went into that station for his little inspection, and he was really rude about it, and in the midst of all that, he gives me a warning. I forget what it was. Such a nonsensical warning, you know. Like, you can't argue. For one, you're a truck driver. You're trying to make some money, get this damn load down the road, and it's a foreign state. So he just did his thing on me, with his little warning, and even the drivers and his buddy behind the counter were, they were kind of scratching their head like, the guy's looking like a fool. I came this close to laying into him, but at the time I was living in New Jersey, I didn't have time to fight that racist bastard. So, I took his little warning, ripped it up promptly, and left. So, this thing with racism just makes no sense. It's so much extra work, So, but that's what happened to it. Shrinks, and for some reason, the southern states really adopted and lay hold of it, even into this day. When I spent some time in Philly, and I would talk to some of the men there about how the white cops would just take black people off the street and drop them off in exclusively white neighborhoods, right in the middle of there, and the black men would have to run out of the white neighborhood for fear of their lives, because that was the way it was. That was just the early 80s and 70s. So we ain't that far removed. It's just some of the glaring examples of this idiocy are kind of been moved away. So Alba, Texas, founded in 1881. 50 people just go down, start a little colony or whatever in 1881, and it's a little, wars have kind of subsided a little bit. America kind of has that territory. By 1910, that grown to almost 2,600 people. 2,200 plus of them were white. Now, they also had Native Americans, Mexicans, Albanians, Armenians, Bohemians, a lot of different ethnicities and races there, but no black folks in Alba, Texas. And that brings up a point about black folks being exclusive. We black folks need to shamelessly be exclusive in their bid for access to wealth and resources. We don't have to align with gays and minorities and people of color and all these groups and politics and terms that water down the specific message of blacks getting the access that they need and deserve. You know, it's really unacceptable how that happens, because America will readily sit down at the table with gays, readily sits down with women, readily sits down with um, Hispanics, Arabs, Asians. But when blacks come to the table, there's so much resistance, and people scratch their head, and all of a sudden we need politics, and we need debates, and CNN, and America doesn't know what to do. It's at a loss for doing what's right here in America, home of the brave, land of the free. Hence, Colin Kaepernick does not stand for that. You know, I no longer do, even now that I understand that anthem, some of the fullness. You read the poem, the fullness of the poem. You know, the anthem is based on a portion of the poem. The fullness of the poem has very explicit racist comments in it. You know, but you know, we Americans, Black Americans, almost specifically, just like to be hand fed, and we keep passively accepting stuff. We don't question. We don't take the time um, to critique and understand what we're being fed, what is being um, handed to us um, here in America. And we just need to do a better job of that, and not get into the symptoms of what's happening with Americans, with black people in America. All right. His question, his portion of the book, he talks about white Americans and how white Americans, you know, on paper, they'll say they're not racist, and they're all for inclusion in America and all that. But he says, you know, you got to push the question, the census to white Americans a little further and say, okay, um, how many black friends do you have? How many black friends do you eat with? You know, uh, do you have casual black people in your lives? And then the story changes a little bit. And, you know, us black folks, we don't owe America anything. You know that, right? We were drafted into this country, compelled to work, uh, and not properly compensated for the back-breaking, sun-blistering, hand-damaging work that we engaged in this nation. Um, and things are moving so in such a different way economically. You know, it's almost irrecoverable. You know, I don't know if we ever do really recover. You know, my sense is there needs to be some real drastic, something really drastic needs to happen to level the playing field, the economic field here in America, or um, or we'll just never recover. You know, we need one more shot, and it's got to be something to awaken black minds, put white privilege and power back on its heels, and um, you know, encourage black folks to come as a united front on a lot of these issues and areas. Hard to say. I hope you're not living in a sundown town. We're kind of we've kind of cast that off, but there's still places, I'm sure, in America where to be black and to be out at night in a white neighborhood is probably not the best of choices. I'm Thomas Nyback. That's day 46, 365 days towards racial change. We are well on our way to getting this year over with. Let's keep plugging away at it. Your likes, comments are welcome. Please spread the word. Share this link with someone you know and love. Bye-bye.